Hello everybody and welcome to that weird in-between holiday time where it's not quite Christmas and not quite New Year's. Today I'm gonna be doing the second run, excuse me cat, of Werewolf the Apocalypse Heart of the Forest. And in this run I will try and focus on seeing if the game allows me to never understand becoming a werewolf at all. I will also try to make choices that I haven't the last time, just so that we are aware of what those choices do. I will be reading the whole thing back to back because I don't really expect people to watch my other videos. So, in every single video that I make, I want to represent the game in its fullest. You can also meet my cat. He had just thrown up on my rug. Because cats do that. Cats do that quite a lot. It shouldn't even be worrying. I wanted to let him out to see if he wants some food or water. Well, let him out of my room, not out of the apartment. And he decided no, that is definitely not what he desires. Instead, he desires to eat the tiny bit of pine that I have on my desk. That's definitely not edible. Because cats are little weird guys. I have read a very, very sad story about a cat from a person that was absolutely certain that a cat was possessed, so they drowned the cat. Which is unbelievable how cruel some people can be. When cats are legitimately just cats. I had to make sure that I see where my keyboard is, because I currently have a cat button in front of me. This is a game about rage and how it helps us to do things that we need to be done, as well as things that we later regret, sometimes both. How do you feel about that? Well, I prefer to think before I act. So you're the observant and cunning type. That's okay. There's no right path here, just your decisions and consequences. Consequences, schmonsequences. I am smarter than that. Because that is a choice that I haven't done the last time. Oh, and another thing, because I'm trying to do everything that I can to avoid the main goal of the game, which is, you know, to become a werewolf and participate in that whole journey, I will still be trying to keep my rage at, like, 0, the best that I can. The woods are full of stars. They flicker, come closer, run away. They want me to chase them, to play hide and seek. The last time I observed, this time I hide. They dance around the tree trunks, floating up the gusts of wind that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves, hide, but they bunch up and fly toward me like an arrow. Rushing down, they soon upon me, but just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear and the dark of the night returns. In the darkness, the spirits keep the forest alive, whisper about the enemy. I begin to move, unnoticed, one with the night, and then I wake up. Confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay to such an extent that it's hard to breathe. The smell fascinates me. The smell is both fascinating and repulsive, is everywhere. A memory stirs deep in my mind, something elusive from my earliest childhood. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in dark-leaved ivy, are covered in ripples of lichen, where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate with a ghoulish, sickly green light. The dark, sponge-like mushrooms cling to fallen trees. I try to breathe. I'm trying very hard to remember what choices I have already made in order to make unique choices. I take a deep breath and suddenly realize that it's not the forest that smells so foul, it's me. I look down and see my hands covered in dark substance. I'm naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid is clinging to my skin. I can feel it on my face and my hair, blood. I hide. I'm permanently hidden. My dream, don't mind me. I crouch down and plant my palms on the soil, my eyes darting back and forth. I feel like I'm being watched. There is a severed head right in front of me. I am gonna be sick. Because that just removes some rage. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open, the tongue stuck out. It's obscene. I feel bile rising in my throat and I start to retch. And then eyes open in the darkness. Who is it? I can see their silhouettes, shades of jet black against the darkness. The smell of fur and moss and bloodied earth. Massive creatures, some with horns, some with antlers. Their eyes burn, small, fiery windows into hell. I look at them and something wakes inside me. Defiance. They tell me stories of their lost battles and dying hopes, and I say no! I tell them my stories of the enemy and how they're so stupid, so clueless, that we almost feel pity as we kill them. They listen and laugh. I laugh with them. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants of me. And then I wake up. Can I, like, stay awake this time? Also, I know it's only been 2 days. I don't know what's wrong with my brain. I legitimately do not remember the choices that I make. So I'm just prioritizing not having any rage whatsoever and avoiding any situation that makes me into a werewolf. That dream... that dream kinda, echoes forward in the lines of events, so I'm wondering, does that mean that the event is preset, or can you do something so catastrophically wrong that you just never become a werewolf? Because that would be my goal. Maya? Maya! Maya, wake up! I opened my eyes. My neck was stiff. I stretched lazily as I assessed where I was out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder, disturbed. I'm gonna comfort her because it's zero rage option. It's alright. I squeezed her hand to comfort her. She looked at me concerned. You were laughing like maniacally. Maniacally. Closer! I can't do that word. I blinked. The memory of the dream was still there and the taste of blood in my mouth. I'm glad I wasn't alone. Thank you for coming with me, I said. The girl next to me smiled. I think we're almost there. Her name was Anya. We met a couple of weeks earlier on the orientation day. She's adventurous, just coming with someone to the middle of nowhere that she met just a couple of weeks ago. Maybe she was just that bored. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow I managed to talk her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. We were there to study medicine. We both came to Poland for the same reason, to study medicine. It was less expensive here and we both received government scholarships. So did you want to become a doctor, or she asked when we first met? I had a knack for healing. Yeah, the game tracks my decisions and puts them into nice dots. I've always been obsessed with nature and how things worked. I wanted to uncover all of life's secrets, and I had a pretty uncanny knack for herbs and other plants. Uncanny for a city girl, at least, although my grandfather once told me that I got it from his maternal aunt. That's why Anya and I were on a bus to Polish town, which I'm no longer gonna attempt to pronounce. Białowieża. Białowieża? Białowieża. A small village in northeast Poland near the border with Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. She seemed excited. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my kabanosi, dried meaty sausages that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the US. I was glad Anya has decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around and really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone. And this is place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches and visiting Białowieża National Park with me instead. So far it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling, but why are we here again? Good question. Why were we here? The most honest question would have been because I've been dreaming about the forest in Białowieża since I can remember. But people didn't understand when I said things like that. I looked her in the eyes and I told her everything. I always had those dreams when I'm in this forest and it speaks to me, I say hesitantly. I'm not sure why, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. Only my grandfather understood the dreams. Respect the forest, he would say, and pay attention to your dreams. It was all that I got from that part of the family before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad. I waited for her to respond. Anya was silent for a long time. Wow, that's intense, she looked at me with what seemed like respect. Wouldn't dare tell anyone a story like that. I think it's great that you come from such a magical place, she smiled. Last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything about my future in the damn forest of my weird-ass family. I had a clear goal in mind. It wasn't there by mistake. I planned this trip for months with a clear goal in my mind. I had to face the forest. It feels like the most harmless one, because my destiny would involve me being a werewolf and my family would lead me to the same place. My dreams, my grandfather's stories, the fact my family was from there. There were just too many coincidences. The forest wanted something from me and it was time to find out what. But honestly, I had no idea what to expect. Białowieża looked like an overexposed photo of a village with the contrast turned all the way up. It was a hot, sleepy day on a hot, sleepy street, and everything, the old trees, the yellowed grass, the weathered wooden houses, the fences, seemed almost normal. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp as though they were freshly printed with darkest of inks. And they moved. For a second I could have sworn they moved, but then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I don't know what is it with the cats in this game, but they seem to hate werewolves, so I'm gonna pet her. Here, kitty, 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 I said, squatting and reaching down for the cat. It rammed me affectionately with its head and started rubbing against my legs, totally ignoring the outstretched hand. Hey Maya, Anya said, looking at me surprised. Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go, Anya put on her backpack. I'm tired and I really need to find the toilet. For a moment I was tempted to just get out of the sun and worry about my missing friend later. I decided I didn't need them because I picked him up the last time. I grabbed my backpack and started walking. I'll manage on my own. Thanks for nothing, I muttered under my breath. Anya sighed with relief and followed me. Białowieża had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodation was bed and breakfasts. Now here's the interesting thing. The friend shows up like 15 minutes later. So, we were too impatient to wait 15 minutes. That's where we stayed. I found one that was nice, clean, and that has good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. We dropped off our stuff and freshened up a bit. Maybe we should have waited for your friend, Anya asked, concerned. I shrugged. I'll find him sooner or later. I only have one friend, and it is Anya. I am still very cunning and not at all brave. My inspiration is lacking as well. I had other things in mind. I am gonna go hiking. to the forest I dreamed about. Screw my ancestors. It was dark in the woods, dark, humid, and chilly. The leaves didn't let through a lot of sunlight. Daniel looked at Anya and me over his shoulder. How do you like her? We met maybe 20 minutes earlier. Anya had Googled local guides, and he was apparently the best person to go if you wanted to see the forest. So I found him, and now we are here. He was a strange one. Daniel was a strange guy, slender but muscular, not the CrossFit type. It was more the kind of strength you get from working all day long in the open. His skin was weather-beaten and bronzed by the sun like tanned leather, and he moved in a very deliberate way. But his fingers were slim and delicate, and his eyes were the strangest shade of yellow-green. So, he repeated, how do you like her? I wasn't sure whom he meant. Do you mean the forest? I asked. Polish was a strange language, and they gave the most unexpected genders to objects and ideas. I mean, Pushka, he gestured around us. The word sounded like the wind rustling in the leaves. Pusha. Pusha is the right word, not forest. Forests are like fields or orchids. Cultivated, he spat as he said it. And Pusha, she's older than even the concept of fields. He was using the word as though it was a name. I stood there and watched the forest. Looked around with fresh eyes. I felt as though I entered the belly of a gargantuan beast. The trees stretched toward the sky like giant ribs, and the whole canopy moved like a beast rising and falling. In the twilight, the wet, meaty mushrooms, screaming with colors yellow, scarlet, purple, looked like internal organs. The vines growing on the corpses of the fallen trees looked like arteries. The breath of the beast was wet and smelled of decay. It hasn't noticed that I was there yet. I laughed at the absurdity of the thought. Which choice is safer? It was all very alien. It's just staying in cities is probably the best way to avoid turning. I laughed at the absurdity of the thought. It seems I don't know. Alien, I shrugged. The instant I said it, I heard a low growl. It took me a second to realize it was from him. You're stupid. This is nature. It's your home too. I stood my ground. You asked for my opinion. I wasn't gonna let it go. I gave it to you. What's your problem? You're wrong, he repeated firmly, but that's okay. You just don't understand what you're looking at. I now cannot use my willpower for social tasks, which is fine. I was cautious when I asked my questions. You look like you know all the local legends and folktales, I said. I didn't elaborate why I was interested in the topic. Daniel stopped abruptly and turned to me, watching me for a while. His nostrils flared as though he was tasting the air. I don't share them with strangers, he said, then hesitated, but for some reason Pushka doesn't think you're a stranger. Come on, he started walking. I know exactly what you need to see. That piqued my interest. So I was right. There was something hidden in the family's past, but it seemed to have a lot to do with the forest. With every step, I was getting closer to solving the mystery, so I followed him. Now, this feels very dangerous, because all of this is werewolf land. Let's visit the wolves, then. Old stories, families divided. He started walking, but after a few steps, he stopped abruptly, like he remembered something. Then he turned to me. Could you do me a favor, please? Sure. Yeah, man, sure. What do you need? He ran his hand through the moss on the dead tree trunk, smelled his fingers, and then reached into his pocket. He took out a small stone. It was just a stone. I noticed some brown spots on the surface, but otherwise it was just a stone. But it must have been something more, at least with Daniel. I would like you to take the stone, he held out an open hand toward me, and throw it in the direction you think we should go. I did what he asked. Who am I to defy old rituals? Okay, I said, reaching for the stone. I took the stone, closed my hand around it. Be careful, whispered Anya. It was just a stone. Cold and rugged, it felt like any other stone. Closed my eyes and thought about the wolf, then trying to imagine that place. Probably a hole in the ground, long forgotten, dead. Like most of this forest, I threw the stone. I felt my hand rising entirely on its own and throwing the stone as far as I could. When I opened my eyes, there was a path where the stone had fallen. Hadn't noticed it before. Okay, Daniel patted my back. Let's go. I'm just gonna say okay. I played it cool. He gave me a faint smile before he turned to head deeper into the forest. It's better if I don't question things. Less answers come that way, and therefore I can avoid being a wolf. The first thing I noticed when we stopped was a pine tree. A pine tree I knew. I remembered it. Small, twisted, and crooked, with roots sticking out of the side of the hill on which it grew. I knew it was wise. Every bend of the branch held hidden knowledge that was waiting to be discovered. Months before that, when I decided to come to Poland, I dreamed of that tree. I was sure of it, just like I was sure that under its roots I would find a burrow, and a few feet away another one, like two dark eyes gazing at me as I approached. Daniel passed me and approached the tree. He pressed his cheek against the trunk. "Hello," he said quietly. I said nothing. I looked around, but we were the only people here, so I remained silent. A sudden gust of wind threw a cloud of dust in my face and into my eyes. "This is the den," announced Daniel. "It's abandoned, of course, but it's still worth seeing." Why was it abandoned? Let's try not to insult the forest before it assaults my eyes again. What happened? I asked. Humans happened, Daniel sighed. He sat under the tree, leaning his back against it. It was a hot spring morning when they found this den. No one knows who the men were, even though it was only one human generation ago. There were 6 cubs here under the roots of this tree. He stopped stuttering and seemed to enjoy telling the story. I enjoyed listening. And I enjoyed listening to it. There was something calming in his voice and the way that he talked. The slow gestures and wistful eyes made me feel as though I was with the cubs on that hot spring morning. I don't think they wanted to hurt the wolves, he continued. They probably thought they'd been abandoned. That is why they took the cubs with them. Humans have the instinct that makes you try to befriend everything, especially if it's dangerous. Yeah, we're like that. Yeah, we are something like that, aren't we? I smiled. I'm not saying it always works out, but the intention is good, and I believe the men who kidnapped the wolves wanted to do something kind, he continued. Anyway, they took them. Out of the 6, 2 lived to see the cold summer that year. The wolf mother used to come to the farm where they were and howl. People on grave, they heard her. I knew that howl. And suddenly I heard that howl. I knew exactly how it sounded. I felt despair and longing gnawing at my soul. I remembered how the cubs had reacted. They were silent. When she came, we never answered. Young as we were, we understood. If there was no going back, survival was the only law, and despair was a weakness. Maya, are you okay? Anya asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. I liked how he told the story, because that is all that it is to me this time around, the story. You're such a good storyteller, I said, trying to brush it off. For a moment there, I felt like I was one of them. Thank you, Daniel sighed, looking at the tree and the burrow. The cubs that survived were sold to some people on Kajnovka, a town near Białowieża. Okay, Kajnovka? Oh, these are so hard. But after a while, both of them ended up back in Białowieża with the scientists. They have a station in National Park. One of the wolves, Pazan, was a celebrity of sorts. If you saw any wolf photos from here, they were probably of Pazan. He was even on the postcard. In the end, the smartest cub survived. It's impressive that Kazan survived. I decided it was smart to befriend people. Daniel smiled. Survival is always good, he agreed. There was a slight gust of wind and the tree creaked. I remember that the sound from my dreams as well, a sound that made me feel safe. Well, as Daniel is now sympathetic to us, why not ask what happened to Kazan? And what happened later? I felt like I knew Daniel well enough to ask that. Is Kazan still alive? He lived for 8 years in the park. Daniel looked at me with his yellow-green eyes until they let another male wolf into his pen. They fought over the she-wolf and Kazan lost. Daniel looked up from her phone. I read about that. She sounded upset. They didn't notice he was wounded. It took him 3 days to die. Daniel shrugged. He lived a long life and died fighting. It was good. We fell silent. Looked at the burrows for a long time. This place, my friend. So I tried to keep it important and respected. I think it's my mission, you know? I'm gonna continue being nice to him, though it might be a mistake. I could relate to that. I think I understand. The forest had a way of sending people on missions. Daniel looked at the tree one last time. Goodbye, he said. Let's not offend the forest. I also said my goodbyes. Goodbye, I repeated, and we left. The last time I didn't do that, the forest was upset enough to blow dirt in my face, so like, you know, maybe just like don't piss off the forest. Let's explore the burrows. Trail soon disappeared. Sometimes we walked along a barely visible path made by some animals. Sometimes we followed a stream or a gully. But for the most, our trek we talked through the dense undergrowth. Daniel was a great guide. He had no compass in hand, no map, yet we were heading dead north. And he moved through the forest with grace and ease. Like it was his backyard and he was showing us around. It was a pleasant walk. There was always a path through the brambles, the ground was even, and the branches stayed out of our way. It almost felt like the forest wanted us to find the way. The forest was full of wonders. I have no rage here. Walking through the forest, I couldn't decide what to do. I wanted to see, hear, touch, and taste everything. Wild strawberries were hiding in the bushes, fresh and sweet. Leaves glistened with droplets of dew, snails, pebbles, strange plants and mushrooms, armies of ants marching across our path. Everything was a treasure. It was as though the Pusha was showing us the best it had to offer. I resisted the temptation to take anything because I don't think that the forest would appreciate it. I sighed, walking past yet another wild strawberry bush, but I resisted the temptation. Take only when you're in need, Daniel said, catching my gaze. We continued in silence. We've been walking for a while when I noticed that Daniel's steps had become slower. He was also looking around more often. He hunched slightly. I just enjoyed the moment. I'm cool. I have no willpower, but I'm cool. I sat down on the fallen tree trunk, looking around, and just enjoyed the afternoon. After a moment, Daniel shook his head. They're tricky to find sometimes, he mumbled. Be quiet for a minute, please. That was when I felt it. Ash in my mouth. The smell of smoke and wet soil, and a pull. It felt weird. I feel weird, I whispered, something like a pull? I looked intrigued but not surprised. Okay, try to focus, tell us where it's from. So I focused. And soon enough, I led us to a path on my left under a dead tree. He followed me and I followed my feet, knowing exactly where they should go. Under the crooked tree, past the dead trunk and the sponge-like mushrooms, across the patch of wet, dark green moss, all the way to a place that didn't look much different than the other parts of the forest until you noticed the mounds. There was something about the flattened hills that drew my attention. They must have been bigger in the past. I could imagine them vividly when they were built. The tall, proud burrows, the dead decomposing on the ground, returning to Earth, feeding all the new life that was growing from them. The trees around us were the fingers of the dead sticking out of the ground, and then it stopped. It was a feeling anchored in my chest, akin to a taste of ash in my mouth and the smell of smoke. Longing, sadness, resignation. Now, that is a pretty dark implication, considering that when we murdered somebody, in the previous playthrough, the game was all like, oh yeah, you take them to those mounds and you put them there. So 2 options here. One, which is much nicer, is that people used to just bury their dead here. Like, no matter who died and how they died, they buried their dead here, not in a graveyard somewhere else. The less nicer consideration is that werewolves used to kill a lot more people. But there was more. A sense of sacredness. It filled me with calm excitement, and when I closed my eyes, I saw a fire burning in the darkness. Voices. The village was burning and people were fighting. Illuminated by the flaming buildings, I walked among them unseen, whispering in their ears. They listened and fought even more fiercely. Some in ancient Roman armor, some in rags, some in animal skins, some in uniforms from the World War, some in modern camo. Are they the enemy? They shouted at one another, confused. Death to the enemy. They all were. They all were my enemies, and I made sure they kept fighting. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me. You were somewhere else, he said. You said you had family here? I dodged the question. What does that have to do with anything? I snapped, dodging the question. He sighed. I don't think you should be here, he said tensely. You're not ready. I didn't feel ready. Yeah, I think you're right, I said and followed him. On the way back, I was lost in my thoughts. The voices in the vision knew what I had to do, almost as though what was expected of me. But was this what the Forrest wanted from me? To murder a whole bunch of people? Daniel said that Pusha has called me. Was the vision showing me what the Forrest needed? I was scared. I trembled. The bigger picture was starting to come to light, and I wasn't sure if I liked what I saw. The Pusha wanted me to deceive. The walk was uneventful. I felt a little tired. The shadows of the enormous trees pulled the sweat on my skin. The taste of ash lingered in my mouth. Stop tasting ash, you weirdo! Go and lick some moss. It will definitely help you. It started with the hair on the backs of my hands rising. The air around me seemed brighter, lighter. The leaves in the tree trunks turned yellow, and my skin started to prickle. I'm just making sure that everything still looks halfway decent because, my cat's messing with a lot of my desk. I think it's fine. It is fine. It is absolutely fine. I realized that I couldn't hear anything except for low buzzing that was filling my ears. I couldn't think. Words appeared and disappeared in my head faster than I could notice them. I had to do something, snap out of it. I took a step back. I have no rage, I'm fine. I took a step back to assess the situation, looked around and noticed there was a clearing nearby with some kind of wooden construction in it. There was also a shadow, a silhouette of a person moving slowly, deliberately. I approached. The clearing was a plateau between huge boulders. There were double-trunked trees between rocks and an angular wooden construction that struck out of the ground like a sore thumb. There was a bike leaning on it. But more importantly, there was a man, and he was moving in the most beautiful, harmonious way I'd ever seen. It was definitely hypnotizing. I looked at him for a moment, at the way his muscles danced under his tanned skin. Now this sounds like a very sexual novel. He took a slow step to the side, and even though his foot didn't make a sound when it touched the ground, I started. That was it. That was the key, the silent rhythm of his steps, the rhythm of that place, the rhythm of my heart beating in my chest. The energy that had been filling me earlier took form. It was flowing in the rhythm with his steps, with the flow of his hands. The words came out of my mouth, seemingly without my knowing. Hey, how are you doing? What did you do? What did you do? He smiled. It's a little bit complicated. Stretched his hand toward me. I'm Cornel, he said with a hard German accent. Shouldn't you be on the logging site? Daniel asked him after I introduced myself. I needed to center myself, he answered. The others are still there, don't worry. Center himself here? How can you come here to center yourself? I asked, remembering the buzzing, restless energy from just moments before. This place is special, Daniel said. Some people call it a place of power, as I told you. And they have good reason to, Cornel added. Look around you. So I looked, and my big eyes looked. It was a clearing filled with light. I could see Cornel's traces, beautiful pattern on the ground. But there was one thing that caught my attention more than anything else. Fruit trees? Are those fruit trees? I asked, not quite believing my eyes, just here in the middle of the forest. Just noticing them made me feel a little more at ease. Yeah, pears and apples, Cornel nodded. People believe this was a place of worship thousands of years ago. Hence the fruit trees, the stone circle, and now the tower. And indeed, there is a lot of energy in this place. You felt it, didn't you? That was probably the heat. Shrugged. I felt something. Maybe it was just the heat. Let's stay entirely atheist and then maybe we can get to not be a werewolf. I don't think so, Cornel answered slightly annoyed. The pusha is wounded and in pain, and it calls out in rage to anyone who can hear it. Here, the scold is louder, and you see the logging, his eyes darkened, is slaughter. Anya gasped quietly. Every priceless thing can be destroyed by greed. Logging is illegal, of course, but illegal is sometimes just a way of saying a bit more expensive, but still profitable. Especially for huge corporations. The forest is hurt, the wound is getting bigger, as is its desperation. Who was doing the logging? I frowned. Who's doing the logging? I asked calmly. If anything was to be done here, it had to be done in an informed way. Cornel regarded me for a moment with a faint smile. You have a connection with this forest, don't you? You should come to the logging site and meet everyone. Absolutely, Anya eagerly agreed. Well, I'm gonna say that it sounded good. It definitely does not sound good. I don't want to go to the logging site, but I have to. It could be the next step, and even if it wasn't, something had to be fucking done about the logging situation. Yeah, I'll come, I smiled. Great, you will understand what you need to do. He jumped suddenly and looked at the wooden tower and the bike I noticed earlier. Die Schwalbe is getting restless. My German is even worse than my Polish. And as Daniel pointed out, I should be on the logging site, setting up the protest. Schwalbe? What is a Schwalbe? I asked, confused. He named his bike Swallow, Daniel explained. He loves it very much. Cornel grinned. Oh, I do. Nice meeting you, Maya. All I wanted to do was get out of there. The moment he disappeared, the buzzing came back. It wasn't as strong as before, but it was there. All I wanted to do was get out of there. We went on through the greenery. The buzzing in my ears slowly decreased. We made our way back. I am not staying here. As we walked through town, Anya nudged me and pointed at a tall, broad-shouldered, freckled guy standing at the bus stop with a long expression on his face. I remembered his face from the pictures on social media. It was Friend who stood me up earlier. I was very glad to see him because I have no rage. Bartek? I waved at him and smiled. Sorry I missed you earlier. Maya, what are you doing here? He blurted with surprise when he saw me. I was sure you missed the bus. Started walking and talking. His accent was broad and East European. I'm glad that I meet him. There were like a couple more people that you can meet in town. I don't want to meet everybody. Like, majority of people here are werewolves. I want nothing to do with them. I flooded him with questions. Luckily, he loved talking about his home, so when I flooded him with questions, he kindly obliged. He talked about how the village had become a tourist destination, how the logging business moved to a nearby town, how the trains had stopped coming and the local station had been turned into a hotel for wealthy foreign hunters. The dozens and dozens of bison statues scattered around the village watched us indifferently. We walked along the only street in the village. Nearing the center, if you could call it that, every house has a garden and the air was dense with the fragrance of flowers. I took a deep breath. So, did you find anything linking me to the forest? I asked. Bartek shook his head. Nothing, absolutely nothing, sorry. He was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. He looked afraid. What's up, man? I smiled. Split the beans. I'm a big girl. I can take it. But he just clammed up. You know what? I think you should drop it. It was almost too easy. Bartek tensed up. But I just shrugged and smiled. Okay, let's go. I winked at Anya. He looked like I'd pulled the rug from under him. But you said it was important. He was ready to crack. I got you. I laughed and punched his arm. I knew you wanted to tell me. Well, he brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told them that my friend from the States was looking for her roots and wanted to know about the place her family came from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And then I mentioned your name. He shook his head. I urged him to continue. Filthy American, nobody likes us here. Bartek, no dramatic pauses, please, I urged him. The tension is killing me. One of the old men told me to go to hell. The other spat on the ground and his wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller, and then my own grandmother told me to stop asking. She said something else as well. I'm gonna be very tense for this imaginary grandmother. Okay, probably not imaginary in the story, but I mean, she's not there right now, which means that she doesn't exist. That's how my brain functions. Totally. What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. Suddenly, the sweet golden afternoon wasn't so sweet and golden anymore. I laughed. I have no rage. Nicely done. I punched his arm and laughed. I almost thought you were scared of me. Bartek smiled awkwardly. Yeah, it was just old wives' tales. Look at me, I winked at him. Do I look like the big bad wolf to you? We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk. And that could only mean one thing. I was on the right track. My pulse quickened and I tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was on the right track. I needed to gather my thoughts. It was a long day and a lot had happened and I was very tired. It was good to meet you in person, he said, but I need to be going. All this traveling and walking through the forest, it was exhausting, I smiled. Sure, where are you staying? It turned out we were going the same way, of course. He went back to the bed and breakfast. He lives here, why is he staying there? The bed and breakfast was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They were lost in conversation and didn't even notice that I was gone. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back smiling and a little flustered. What a day, she smiled. So what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. Place of power sure made an impression on me. Felt the strange energy in the place of power before we met Cornwall. It still freaks me out. Cornwall seemed so cool though, Anya answered. He seemed to really understand what was going through. Well, what you're going through. Daniel was a very strange guy. There's something strange about the Forrest guy. I tried to put my finger on it. He acted like he learned how to be human from a book. A book he did not understand. I know, right? Maybe it's the isolation. It seems like he spends most of his time in the forest. I was moved about the story about the wolves. The wolf cubs that were kidnapped and died in captivity aside, the story stayed with me, you know? She put a hand on my arm. Divided families, huh? It's okay, Maya. I freaked out by the vision at the barrows. Something strange happened when I visited the old barrows, I said, and instantly regretted it. Never mind, it was probably just dehydration. Yeah, it was probably it, but you looked weird, she laughed nervously. A lot of things today were weird if you think about it. They're cutting down the forest. Can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I want to check out this protest people we're talking about. Maybe we could go there tomorrow? Well, I didn't feel like talking anymore. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. Even though I was tired, sleep didn't come quickly. Anxiety was spreading its cold, writhing roots deep in my chest and stomach. I lay there for some time, looking at silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the tangled branches. The stone daimyo asked me to throw the leaves. Came here with one question, and now I had so many. I felt like I was closer to getting my answers, though. I felt the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I should go and see the logging protest, find Cornell, and make them talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors as I drifted to sleepy time. Sleepy time's good. Sleepy time's nice. A black cat stands directly in my path, its eyes shining in the moonlight. It looks right at me, waiting. I tremble. Something is coming. It's huge and monstrous. I'm gonna be a cub this time. I am a wolf cub, like the ones my grandfather told me about. It will grow and my fangs will become sharper. Will taste blood. Feel a pull and I surrender to it. I run toward a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting, and suddenly they're just trees and tree trunks. I start dancing, because it friggin' makes no sense. I dance among the fallen trees. There is no time to weep. We must laugh and live and be ready to strike. There is a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are writhing chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. Their weight unmoving. Imagine being this manipulated by a tree? Like, that would be very, that wouldn't feel nice. It's just feeling really creepy. I turn to the forest for answers. The dead don't hold answers, and neither do the machines. I walk between the trees trying to hear their wisdom. They whisper to me, telling me to look at the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other. An old sad wolf with grey hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy. These awful, rotting stench, I know that much. But how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me at the clearing. I look at them cautious. I gaze at them just like they gaze at me. Now the three of us are all measuring each other. They descend to the opposite side of the clearing, one by one. Other shadows join them. I stand in the middle of it all. Oh, the event centers on us, and I want to find a way to leave the event behind. The next morning was full of sunshine and birdsong. I could smell the heat of the afternoon building. Those long, honey-like hours in late June when Earth isn't tired of its own warmth yet. But it was crisp and pleasant now. I got up. I sat on my bed for a moment, letting my feet dangle from it. I felt overwhelmed. The weight of the previous day had coiled up somewhere in my chest and didn't really know what to think about everything I learned. And there was the dream. Then I remembered the dream, the clearing, the animals in the night sky. How was I supposed to react to it? I took a shower, ate something without really paying attention, and went out. Anya has joined the party. We were halfway through the forest when Bartek caught up with us. You were right, Anya. The protest is important. Protests, activists, answers. I don't really want to visit it, but let's do it anyway. As I walked toward the logging site, I noticed they were More people heading that way. A police car, a couple of SUVs, a TV truck, young people on bicycles, a green Land Rover from the Forest Services. I got to the site and felt utterly surreal, like I stepped onto a movie set. Then I looked around. So what's the plan? I had to figure out the forest. I need to figure out what the forest wants from me. I looked around. On my right was the ancient forest. On my left was the freshly torn clearing ahead of me. Ruining the view were huge logging machines and a group of people arguing in their shadow. Nobody paid attention to me, which was good. I need to play this by my own rules. I looked at the clearing. The trees they cut down lay in the middle, thrown together, lifeless, limp, just like in the dream. Surrounding them were the harvesters that killed them, and people who squabbled over their corpses, the protesters, the reporters, the police, and of course the loggers. The harvesters loomed over the clearing, reeking. I saw a familiar face among the protesters. Up! Cat! Evil cat! Don't do that! You opened Microsoft something. Don't sit down on my keyboard. That's really horrible. What was that even? Where did it go? Nothing seems weird, but that was very weird. Excuse me, no keyboard sitting. Cornell was arguing with a woman with grey dreadlocks. The protesters were clearly conflicted. It could be fun. I went closer looking for a laugh. This could be fun to watch. One of the police officers, young and nervous, said something I didn't fully understand. I smiled. I smiled at him and said, I don't understand in my best Polish. He smiled back. Oh, he said, you're one of them, and then let us go. Then I noticed that someone has joined us. And then I noticed that someone used the commotion to sneak with us past the police. A girl with disheveled, bleached out hair. Don't worry, she patted the officer on the hand. It was an awful pickup line anyway. He recoiled. You shouldn't touch me, ma'am. I rolled my eyes. And wanted to say something, but I was interrupted. Pat, Cornell called her from the gathering. Could you come here? I need you to show Olga the chart. She sighed, reaching to her backpack and taking out a tablet. And they're at it again, she murmured under her breath and winked at me. Coming! We went towards the activist. The destructive power of cats. He's climbing all over my stuff at the moment. He's gonna collapse everything to the floor, which is fine. As I walked towards Cornell, I heard a giant clonk. Excuse me. As I walked towards Cornell, I heard more and more of the argument. Olga, you can't, Cornell was saying. Pat stood next to him with the tablet. He looked a bit amused. You not fucking tell me what I can or can't do, Cornell. The woman with dreadlocks interrupted. I can, because they're destroying our mother. I can fight with all the means at my disposal, even if that means burning the harvesters through the ground. I noticed Daniel standing near her. We took a few steps back, went towards one of the harvesters, turned his back on us all, and pissed on the machine. Olga smiled. Aw, Daniel, you know how to bring the point home. He looked at her confused. Cornell raised his eyebrows. Please stop pissing in public. Burning the harvesters? Cornell asked calmly. This drought? Olga, are you out of your mind? You know what I mean. We fight them any way we can because this is a fucking war, she spat. He sighed. You've never seen a real war and it shows. Nobody's shooting at us and believe me, we want to stay that way. We need a peaceful protest. I approached Cornell. Hi, we need to talk. Hello, Maya, could you wait? I'm right in the middle of something here. In the middle of something? Normally I would wait for them to finish, but this was important. I looked at them. I looked at them both, Olga with her fury and passion, Cornell with his cool professional demeanor, and shared without any reservations what I felt about the situation. I mocked them both. I have No aggression. I'm fine. Bravo! I started clapping. This is clearly the most efficient use of your energy. Bickering! I only inflamed the situation. The argument attracted more people. Some old shook their head and moved forward. They had deep wrinkles and a narrow mouth, and the unisex grace of a tired heroin-preserved rockman. Heroin-preserved? They looked out of place. They looked out of place with their shoulder-length disheveled hair and clean shave and eyes highlighted with eyeliner. Bright blue nails, heavy army boots, red skirt, and tank top completed the look, and pins, lots of pins. All kinds of LGBT plus flags, anarchist and pacifist symbols, and I think some German band stripes. Don't encourage drug use, that's just... Olga, darling, you know I love you, but Cornel really knows what he's doing. Please trust me on this one. They talked to Olga, but kept glancing at me as if to check how I reacted. Fuck off, Kim! You didn't even trust me enough to come here on your own when I asked you to. There was a woman at Olga's side. Next to Olga, there stood a woman, but she was the most beautiful person I've ever seen. I couldn't help but overhear. Kim, you want to teach me about violence? She looked him straight in the eye. About fighting oppression just because your boss went to what? One mission in Afghanistan? Her Polish was peculiar, kind of mellow. Cornel winced. Lisa, leave Kim alone. He didn't know what to say, and it seemed that the whole discussion would be derailed. Maybe that was for the best. Let them solve it their way. And then Olga punched Cornel firmly in the face, turned around and walked away. Turned around holding his jaw and wincing, and then he started to laugh softly. The conversation was over, at least for the time being. Cornel, together with his cronies, walked towards the reporters, while Olga went back to the group of people standing in the shadow of the old oak tree. I looked at the forest. I looked at Pusha. The clearing full of felled trees was like a gaping, bleeding wound in the chest of a friend. I had to do something. I looked at my friends. We have to stop this logging. Yeah, just like Olga said, Anya nodded excited. What they are doing is unforgivable and we have to fight. It's a very complicated situation, Bartek looked thoughtful. I liked what the guy Cornel said, that we should proceed peacefully, not to discourage the public and potential supporters. I looked at one group and then I looked at the other. I don't really want to escalate absolutely anything. That just sounds like fighting, and fighting means bad news. It means werewolf time. Cornel owed me some explanations. Hey, wait for me, I shouted and ran after him. Hey Maya, he said. I see you haven't come alone. He reached out his hand. It was right in the discussion with Olga. Heard you talking, I said earnestly, and I think you were right. Was I? I couldn't tell if he was amused or flattened. Flattened? Flattered! Jeez. His eyes were an uncanny shade of grey. The swelling was almost gone. You heal fast, I pointed at his chin. Or was that not much of a hit? Olga does nothing by halves, he winced. Not when she believes what she's doing is the right thing. Cornel looked me in the eyes. I know why you came to Białowieża. When the forest is under the attack, it reaches out and picks someone. This time it picked you. You seem to believe it. I looked at him, skeptical, but he seemed to believe it. The important question is, do you want to help? I had no time to answer. But before I could answer, I heard a commotion and turned around. The reporters were coming our way, but their cameras were switched off and pointed to the ground. I had a bad feeling about this. There was something defeated in the way that they walked, and suddenly I had the feeling that all was not going to end well. The reporter shook his head and grimaced. Sorry, everyone. We can't do anything. We're not allowed to cover what's going on here. I felt deflated because I need to spend some rage. What do you mean you aren't allowed? Who said so? I wasn't sure if I understood his Polish properly. The reporter shrugged. The people who can send an officer your way, who will kindly ask you to hand over your memory card, or else. Go figure, girl. There was a moment of tense silence, and then it all came together. Suddenly I understood the dream, that there was a moment I could tip the balance. I could still use the reporters. I looked at the protesters. They were as lost as I was. They knew they wanted to protect the forest, but they didn't have a clue on how to do it. I looked around, put my hands in the pockets, and wandered towards the journalist. I asked for a cigarette. Hello, everyone! I said, can one of you bum me a cigarette by chance? There were 4 packets offered and twice as many lighters. I took a Marlboro, lit it, and flashed my biggest, broadest smile at them. Unspectacular as it was, I managed to connect. I acted on it. Does it always look like this? I asked. I mean, is it an everyday situation that you can't report? No, answered one of them. He was tall, in his 30s. There were a few glances towards him, almost a flash of warning, but it was too late. But why were they in Bielorussia at all? Wait, so why are you here at all? I asked, and then it hit me. We were sent here to find some dirt on the activists, so that you get something that would compromise the protests. We looked at one another, then shrugged as if a decision has been made. Okay, what do you have for us? One of the reporters said, turning to Cornell. I want you to meet Dr. Patricia Myers, he said, presenting the somber woman with short, bleached-out hair. She was wearing all black. She's a specialist in endangered species and had something very interesting to share with you. It was Pat. Pat approached the reporters. Please take a look at this map, she requested, holding a tablet in her slim, pale hands. I felt Cornell looking at me. I felt Cornell's gaze, and when I looked at him, he slightly inclined his head. There were distant shouts in the background as Olga and her crowd clashed with the police, but most of the reporters didn't even notice. I relaxed! Ha! Ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha! That was... Asking for a ciggy is just distracting enough that nobody actually does their jobs. Good going, me! Someone patted me on the shoulder. Well done, bravo. It was Kim. He looked around to check if anyone was watching us. This is where you exit the scene. He turned me around and gently but firmly pushed me away. We'll be in touch, they whispered. The ugly truth. When I was on the road to the village and nobody could see me, I doubled over and vomited. I always felt violently sick when there was too much to process at once. In the whole commotion, I lost Anya and Bartek from my sight. I was alone, or so I thought. Well, you had it coming, a voice behind me said, and I jumped. A woman was looking at me. I was fine. I'm fine, I said stiffly. She rummaged in her pocket and handed me a handkerchief. Here, she said, I have water as well if you need some. We walked slowly towards the village. We talked. I learned that she was an independent German reporter who came here about a month ago. Her name was Erica. So why are you protesting the logging? She asked after a couple of minutes of talk. We have to save the forest. I think the Pusha is unique, and when I saw how many trees they've cut in just one afternoon, it broke my heart, I said, still shaken by the sheer number of fallen trees. I have to do whatever I can to save the forest. I looked at her. Why are you asking? She looked at me with renewed interest. Do you know why they're cutting down the trees? She asked back. Because you do know that logging is done by government company, the state forest. I had no idea. I didn't know that, I admitted. In fact, I knew very little. I know very little about the situation, I realized, just what the others have told me. Erica reached for her notebook. It all started with spruce bark beetles. Erica looked into her notes and started explaining the whole situation. That years the beetle infestation was of catastrophic proportions, and the foresters decided that the only way to stop it and save the forest of... The rest of the forest, the forest of the forest, the forestest of the forest, was to cut down as many infested trees as fast as possible. Was cutting down the trees necessary? Is cutting down the trees the only way to stop the infestation? I asked, confused. The foresters state that this is the only way, she said. Some biologists argue that they're cutting the wrong trees and doing it too late to change anything. Couldn't they just remove the dead trees? Maybe if they removed the dead trees, the infestation wouldn't spread. I tried to find a solution. They might do that, but dead trees are what make the forest unique. There are 20 times more species living on a dead spruce tree than on a live one. But was the logging legal? Dumb question, considering that it's the government doing it. Opinions differ, but such massive logging it as in a UNESCO-listed area might be illegal. Erica answered it all. If they have to intervene at all, wouldn't nature just take its course? That's one of the options, Erica admitted, but there's a drought and no one is sure if the forest would survive on its own. It was a complex situation, but that didn't mean that I should step back. I felt that Erica was deliberately playing the devil's advocate. I needed advice. I'm not sure what to think of it, I admitted. I could really use your advice. I'm just doing my job, Erica shrugged. I describe all aspects of the situation to you. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. How convenient. She was putting herself in such a convenient position. Unfortunately, I couldn't just pretend that it wasn't my business. At least I was sure that they were cutting down the trees and that Pusha needed my help. What else could I do? I don't know what else I could do, I sighed. I might not see the whole picture, but I prefer acting to denial. Tried not to show how scared I was. She looked skeptical. You're not the only one feeling helpless, she sighed. So don't let the complexity of the situation stop you. Life is always complex. Yet we carry on. I said nothing. There was so much to process at once. Everything that happened at the logging site. The heat, the stench of the harvesters, the tension between Olga and Cornell, that you could cut with a knife. It all made my head spin. What's the matter, she asked. I admitted my helplessness. I feel so helpless when I saw all that, and took a deep breath, and I remembered what Cornell said. All that mystical stuff. And they said that the forest needs my help. I shook my head. It's a lot to take in. And there was the foul smell back there. She looked at me with a weird expression. What smell? She asked. How come you don't smell it? You didn't smell it? The harvesters reeked of something like meat that has been rotting in acid, only worse. I couldn't even find the words to describe it, but the memory of the foulness still clung at the back of my throat, swimming in my sinuses. She looked at me with a strange expression on her face, though she wanted to say something and then thought better of it. Her eyes. There was sympathy in her eyes. You'll learn in your own time if you stay here long enough, she said, clearly wanting to drop the topic. I let it go. I'm not engaging in the topic. It's funny how they're all like not telling her. Like, hi, you're a wolf. I shrugged. Cryptic remarks never did anything for me. The situation was complicated enough as it was. I just hoped I hadn't made things worse. We walked in silence. When I opened the door, I found Anya and Bartek sitting on Anya's bed. They were a little flustered and were nonchalantly trying to look like I hadn't interrupted anything. We lost the sight of you, Bartek said apologetically. I'm glad you made it back in one piece. So how was your day? Anya asked. I had a chat with the reporters. Had a nice chat with the reporters, I grinned, and I learned a thing or two. Anya frowned. I heard that you can't trust them. Bartek nodded. Of course not. You looked for the right word. They're hyenas. I never said I did, I winked. Bartek had a point. You may have a point, Bartek, I admitted. I barge in and try to solve problems that I might not yet understand. It's cool, he smiled. This whole business is a mess. I met a lot of new people. What a fun day! What a great outing to the middle of like some sort of protest. Met some very interesting people, I said, still excited. Yeah, Yeah, they look like a colorful bunch. Anya grinned. Bartek rolled his eyes. Colorful and uninvited. They sure are passionate. They argue between themselves more than they argue with the loggers, I added. I learned a lot. Did you know that the government supported the logging even when it was illegal? I shared my dismay. Well, maybe the government actually wants to save the rest of the forest. Shut up. If they support it, it can't be illegal, Bartek crossed his arms. Of course it can. I threw my arms up, frustrated. It was all that I wanted to share. Just another day in Białowieża. Białowieża, there we go. We sat for a while in silence. You know, there's more to see than Białowieża, Bartek said to me. You could visit the Pogazielsie, Budzi, Teremiski, Sirlonka. See the open-air museum and the bison. The logging is not all that happens here. Maybe later? I would love to see it all, I sighed, and I'll do that as soon as the situation with the Pusha is resolved. And how is the search for your roots going? I asked Bartek, clearly wanting to change the topic. Oh, asked Bartek of me. I shared what I learned. He said when the forest is in need, it reaches out to people, and I said, and for some reason this time it reached out to me. Wow, Anya looked impressed. Honestly, I'm not sure what to think, but if you need something, just let me know. I was very tired. It's sleepy time. I just sat there looking through the window. The day had been full on and I was exhausted. I didn't notice when I fell asleep. I can do anything, you can do better. It's quiet now. Yet I know deep down inside that something isn't right. I sneak. I'm sneaking through the forest to the logging site. It's getting dark. The light seeps away as though there are millions of tiny punch holes in the sky through which it can escape, and then the darkness starts to pour in. I know what I will see. And I see bodies thrown across the ground, bloodied, maimed, with the limbs torn from the destroyed torsos. I can see some of them are still alive, struggling for air, trying to live. They're all trees, fallen trees, still alive, still struggling for air. But I'm not alone. The monsters are coming. They have long skeletal arms, they're wrapped in glistening black intestines, and each arm has a wide gaping mandible full of frightening blades. They snap at me blindly, but I'm not alone. I turn around and see the forest move. They have horns, they have antlers. Their eyes shine in the dark, and they are ready. I watch them charge, lunging at the monsters, falling prey to the snapping teeth. I feel their anger wash over me, filling me with rage, and I rush to join them. And then I strike. Only when I know the enemy's weakness do I strike. I move unseen and unstoppable, breaking necks, tearing arteries, ending lives. And I'm the only one laughing, and then I wake up. I gasped and bolted upright. I was alone. The sun was setting in the deep. A red light in the room looked like it was bathed in blood. My pillow and duvet were on the ground and I was sweating bullets. Looked at my legs. When did they become so hairy? I could have sworn I shaved them this morning. Time to shave on the full moon. Just every full moon. I thought about going back to sleep, but I couldn't. Since I arrived in this village, I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole, or rather wolf's den. My dreams were getting more and more vivid, and I was scared. Well, Anya was in it from the start. I came here with Anya, and despite all the strange things I've done, she stuck with me. Messaged her and she messaged me back. I'm on a walk, come join me. The sun had just set and the moon wasn't up yet. I started walking. The forest loomed on the horizon. The activist camp was somewhere there. We met near this shop in Białowieża. It was okay, that's probably how it's pronounced. Białowieża. It was characteristic enough point and easy to get to from anywhere in town. What is it? Anya asked. She looked worried. Something strange was happening here. Don't you think that there's something strange happening here? With all the people in the forest, I'm scared, Anya. But there is something strange happening, she nodded. But I have no idea what it is. I know even less than you, she frowned. Maybe we should go to your new friends? The activists? She smiled a little. They're weird. They must know something. That was an option. I mean, they sure know things, but I'm not sure I trust them. You know what they say, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. She smiled and started walking. Let's go. I'm sure they're not sleeping. Do you mind if I text Bartek? I promised I'd meet him tonight. I didn't mind, and he'd soon join us. We went to the activists' camp. The camp had a different vibe than the logging side protest. There were more people here. We looked around, trying to take it all in. The people in the camp seemed cheerful. The smells were very intriguing. They were tense. And I could smell some bacon in the air. People were milling about, setting up camp, singing, preparing posters. It was a joint effort. I was hungry! My stomach growled. I was hungry. Have no idea what your plan is, said Bartek, but you have my support. I'm just gonna see Cornell. Hello, I said as I approached. Cornell smiled at me. Hello, he said, what brings you here? I was confused. I'm confused, I answered. Is it really true? I mean, all the stories I've heard connecting me in the forest? Cornell looked at me with those uncanny grey eyes. I could feel his attention lock on me. Yeah, it's true, he said. And that's why we're here, to stop the government destroying the forest. To show that we don't agree, and that we hope to make a difference, and that you have a role to play. Will it work? I asked. I don't know. All I know is that it worked before. It worked for Gandhi. It worked for segregation and apartheid in the end. It worked with communism. Well, let's see if it works with capitalism as well. Violence is not the option here. We smiled, and I think you know quite well that anger doesn't really get shit done. I knew that. I'm a very non-angry person. I smiled back. Somehow being around him made me feel more relaxed. I know you can count on me, I answered. The forest needed my help, and I couldn't just be an observer anymore. So we may have a little citizen protest going on tonight, Cornell said, but I need your support if we want to convince the others. We all wanted to do something that night, but after a whole day's discussion, they were still divided on what to do. 3 were for one option, 3 for the other. I saw no reason to back up Olga. Ha! I can't even choose that one. I'm gonna go with a peaceful protest. Cornell's very loyal to me now. I voted for peaceful protest, and soon we were on our way to the National Park headquarters and education center. We had some banners to install. Bartek hesitated for a long time, but he joined us in the end. I'm only coming because my dad is out tonight, and we won't see me here in late, he mumbled. It might be better if she goes home. I asked Anya to go home. I'm coming with you, Anya shook her head. When I tried to convince her to go home, that's what friends are here for. Soon, we were there. We were on our way. I realized that we followed the path only because of my vote. I made a difference. The National Park headquarters were located somewhere called Palace Park. The name was historical. The name, like everything in Poland, was historical. Centuries ago, some king had his hunting lodge here, but now it was a mishmash of old and new buildings scattered around the park. Some were rough and bulky, made of stone and brick, while others were an extravaganza of wooden porches, lace-like shutters, and meticulously sculpted pillars. There was no one around, but the area was well lit. I needed to be careful. This wasn't your everyday act of vandalism, this was something bigger. More important, yes, but also more dangerous. Getting arrested in Poland didn't seem like a great way to start my visit, on the contrary. Yes! Reduce that rage! In fact, it could be the end of it. Suddenly I remembered the church located just next to the palace park gate. I could feel its dark silhouette looming in the darkness, waiting. We were ready. I spent the whole day painting the sign at length of material sewn together from what looked like old sheets that were various shades of grayish white. The dark forest letters declared, "Wood is the enemy of the forest!" That is still such a stupid slogan. Where do we hang it? I asked Daniel, who'd come equipped with climbing gear. Because he's asking me, I'm gonna share my recommendation. I think we could attach it to the drain pipes there and there. I pointed at 2 corners of the building and Daniel grunted in agreement. It doesn't matter, Olga said, because hanging the banner is a waste of time. I looked at her, curious what kind of advice she could offer her. I asked her for advice. So what could we do better next time? I asked her for advice. We could vote for a plan that has a chance to actually help the forest. Olga rolled her eyes. It's a great banner, and I'm sure it will look good on the pictures published by a number of independent political blogs. She looked at Cornell. But it's stuck so deep in the overeducated ecological dispute that people won't get it, and the loggers won't care. Cornell just shook his head and gestured Daniel to continue. I waited patiently. I'm getting very analytical this run. Soon the sign was up, screaming our message to all of Bielowiesza. Cornell looked at me. Maya, what do you think? I said that it was glorious. Didn't really get the slogan, but I decided to play along. Oh, it's glorious. I'm glad you think so, he grinned. I love the wording. Humans let the forest grow so that they can take wood from it. But that isn't the purpose of the forest. Finally, we pulled the banner up. My father will have a stroke when he sees this. Bartek let out a repressed laugh. I would also have a stroke when I see this, not because I'm angry or anything, but because wood is the enemy of the forest just really sounds like you want to remove all the trees from the forest and remove the trees from the forest from the forest. It's an important message. Anya looked up with fire in her eyes. The world must know. I looked at the sign flying high over the park. I was proud of my work. When we finished, Cornell gathered us together. I was proud of what we accomplished, and I contributed to that. I put up a banner! We helped the forest, even if it was only a little. Cornell reached for his bicycle. Let's go for a trip, he said, to remind ourselves what we're trying to protect. The woods were full of stars. We cycled in silence, enjoying the company of the forest as it enjoyed ours. After some time, the place of power opened before us. The boulders looked relaxed. A soft breeze rustled in the trees, welcoming us. Anya chuckled. This is exciting, Anya chuckled, and I relaxed. The energy was still there, I knew it, but it couldn't reach me. Not if I didn't allow it to. So why were we here? I asked, looking at Cornell. He turned to me, but before he could answer, a loud sound tore through the silence. It was a gunshot. A gunshot. Anya gasped, looking around, wide-eyed and terrified. The others tensed up, but they didn't look concerned, just confused. We have to get out of here immediately, Bartkus. Whisper was frantic and scared. A hunting party here. Cornell turned towards us like he finally put something together. There was a rustle and I saw a bunch of men in camo, each of them with a rifle, coming towards us between the trees. I took a step back. I had no aggression. This seemed dangerous. I took a step back, pulling Anya with me. Their leader weighed us up for a moment and finally focused on Cornell. This area is closed for the night, the huntsman said in Polish. There was contempt in his voice. There's a hunt going on and you all trespassing. We have police officers here. So I would go home if I were you, unless you want to get arrested. The man's hands were sweaty, his stance off balance. I could trip him in a split second if I wanted to. I backed off. I looked at the man and the other silhouettes, at their rifles at their backs. I wasn't stupid. We needed to get the hell out of here. I ran, the air in my lungs boiling, my skin slick with sweat and the darkness thick around me. Annie and Bartek were running just behind me, or so I hoped. Something was chasing us. We left the shouts and gunshots long behind us, but we couldn't stop. Something was chasing us. Two silhouettes, one lean, the other bulky. I saw them in the corner of my eye as they leaped forward. At first I thought they were people, but as they leaped, they got longer, smaller. I couldn't see clearly. It was dark. The sweat was blinding me, and they were hiding behind the trees. I heard howling and growling, and then I saw there were wolves chasing us. I heard them snarling and snapping, one after the other. I decided to face them. I stopped in the middle of the path and turned to face the animals. They were predators, and I saw no gain in playing the part of their prey. "What are you doing?" whispered Annie, terrified. Bartek grabbed her wrist and pulled her off the path. I looked at the wolves. They looked at me. And I just started talking. I heard the rustle in the leaves, and then there was a voice in my head. My little Ragabash. I knew it was Pusha, that she was pleased with me. I also know that Ragabash meant shadow. "You're looking for me?" I asked, hoping that my nonchalance would confuse them. Wolves dispersed, and then something happened. Something I couldn't see clearly, and two people stepped out from the bushes. They looked at each other with murder in their eyes. "Cornel?" "Wait, she has the right to know." Cornel grabbed Olga's eyes. "One of us is going to bite you," she said matter-of-factly. "And then you will die," Cornel added. "One way or another, the forest needs it." What kind of stupid confrontation is this? Just jump? I closed my eyes. There was a series of wet cracks, like skin breaking, torn from within by muscles that suddenly grew, by bones rapidly getting longer, by fur and teeth and claws. When I dared to look, I saw two 8-feet-tall monsters standing in front of me on the narrow path in the forest. I'm sorry, idiots, what? I knew it! Everything finally clicked. I fucking knew it. Then one of the monsters clawed at the other, lunged and closed its jaws on the other's throat. Blood splurted, drenching me, and before I could start screaming, it was all over. I saw life leave the strange gray eyes. The surviving monster lifted its black and white muzzle. It wrenched. It reeked of death, and its teeth were dripping blood, and jumped me. And then there was only pain. Well, I definitely knew that I was dying, but I'm sorry, you tore apart the only person that I like. Blinded by the blood in my eyes, my shoulder and chest burning around the wound, I knew I was dying, lost in the woods, away from my family, such as it was. Could only watch my life pumped out of my body in the crimson river. I said my goodbyes. Felt the shadows gathering around me, sympathetic, curious, hungry. The forest caught my fall with a bed of moss and twigs. Stopped thrashing, and cold numbness engulfed me. I gave up. My eyes were open, and I stared blankly at the trees. There was a small fragment of the sky visible between the branches. The clouds moved, and there was light, the full moon. It looked different. The moon was a goddess, and she noticed me. "Get up," she said. I got up. It felt good. I know that I shouldn't, but I don't remember why. I don't care. My mind is very clear. Clearer than it ever been before. I see the world in sharp contrasts of black and white. You can't avoid being a werewolf because the fuckers come after you and actually bite you. Movement and stillness. I smell prey. I hear language in the hooting of owls, the whistling of the wind, and the snarling of wolves. I am one with the forest. I stretch. My muscles are sore and cramped, so I stretch like I never stretched before. My arms are longer, my legs are stronger, my heart is pumping, and I feel like I've spent my whole life packed into a box and I've finally been set free. I breathe. I take a breath and feel my ribs and muscles move. The forest smells of blood and fear and excitement. I'm happy. I laugh happily, and others' laughter joins me. We laugh and sing to the moon. Something stings me. I look around. There's a small malformed creature pointing a stick at me. The stick blazes with fire, and there's another sting. The creature disgusts me. Its arms are too short, its legs bent the wrong way. It's covered with a tangled mass of dead plants and the skins of tortured animals. It reeks of things dark and slimy and decay. I push it away. Push the creature away and it flies through the air making funny noises. It hits a tree and stays there, pinned to the branch like a butterfly. My ears prick and I hear more creatures running blindly through the bushes, but I feel better. My leg no longer stings and I feel better than ever before. Is this a dream? Maybe it's a dream, I think as I move silently through the undergrowth. Creatures are running away, their backs turned to me. They stumble and shout. Suddenly one of them turns my way terrified. I just look at it. I look at it and the creature curls up, shielding its face with its paws. It keeps talking, but the noises make no sense. I move on. It annoys me, but I ignore it and move on. Piercing light burns my eyes. The creatures surround me. They seem to work like a pack. They are dangerous. I run away. I'm too smart for such an ambush. I blow on my way through the nearest creature and disappear among the trees. Frustrated shouts make me laugh. A new smell. Is it bacon? The wind brings a new smell. The air tastes of fur and musk and blood. Shapes move among the trees, but there are no creatures. They are people like me. Suddenly I'm surrounded by them. I think I know them. They seem familiar. It's like I met them in the past, but they were hidden. They close in on me. What do they want? I wait. I relax and wait for them unflinching. They approach me and sniff the air. Their smells are overwhelmingly familiar. Once people had sounds attached to them, but now I realize that sounds were not their true names. I look and see no moon, only clouds' tangled branches, so something changes. Something changed and I realized how tired I was. I stumbled. Dankness. The night sky was full of stars. I opened my eyes. Confused, I opened my eyes. The forest around me is thick and dark. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in dark-leaved ivy, were covered in ripples of lichen where the vines hadn't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base were overrun with nettles. The fungi radiated with ghoulish, sickly green light. Dark sponge-like mushrooms clung to the fallen leaves. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I looked down and saw my hands covered in dark substance. I was naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid was clinging to my skin. I could feel it on my face and my hair. Blood. Crouched down and plant my palms on the soil, my eyes darting back and forth. I was being watched. I knew what was coming. I remembered my dream and slowly lifted my eyes. Saw a mutilated body, its severed head right in front of me. I winced and touched it. Overcoming my disgust, I gently touched its wet hair and watched the head toppled over. The face was contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open, as if through the head was still struggling for air. I recognized that face. Oh God! It was Cornell, his grey piercing eyes now dull and dead. The head watched me with reproach. I cried. Felt tears running down my cheeks. I let the sadness in. The bushes rustled, and a moment later I saw Olga. She came out from between the trees, wiping something red off her hands. She looked at me at the head and my face. Get used to it, she said. You're a werewolf. I looked at her, I blinked. Everything faded to black. Up! Well, that is no longer a hunter, that is just Cornell. Cool! The morning smelled of safety, fur, earth, and the forest. I opened my eyes and saw other people cuddling up to me, their muzzles resting on their paws as they slept. Gentle snoring filled the warm space under the low-hanging branches of an old spruce tree. I quietly crawled outside. Quietly as to not wake anyone, I crawled outside. Alone, hiding in the tall grass, I sniffed around. The sky was bright and the forest around me was dark and full of interesting smells. High in the trees, birds yelled about status, sex, and violence. Something was so wrong with that picture. Something wasn't right. My brain wasn't working as it should. The smells were too strong. The grass was too tall. It was a quality that I could recall that was missing from the view in my eyes. Creatures stirred in the bushes nearby. A tall, dark silhouette, a strangely familiar smell. I ran away. I ran before they noticed me, and by the time they realized I already had a head start. "Shit, Maya, wait!" they shouted. "We have to talk." I looked back over my shoulder and saw a pack of wolves chasing me through the clearing. Fuck. The wolves were closing in on me, but they weren't really wolves, were they? They were werewolves like me. Denial and escape. I'm not staying with you fuckers. I ran, swift and silent, jumping over creeks, slipping under the fallen trees, chasing the wind. Could still smell them behind me, even after I'd tear panting and the rustle of the leaves was inaudible. Didn't hear their howls as much as feel them piercing my skin, growling at my legs, slowing me down. The path under my feet was straight and clear. The undergrowth parted before me and I closed as I passed, offering me shelter. For a moment I felt safe, then a new smell. Passing an old spruce tree, I smelled musk and electricity. I realized I wasn't alone. I was a white weasel jumping from tree to tree. Felt more like a shadow than an animal. "To think I took you for the cunning kind, Gaia's child," whispered amused. "Now look at you, running blind." And a second shadow, bigger and grey, burst from the bushes beside me. You smelled of ash and tears. "You're scared. Stop right now." Was I hallucinating? I couldn't believe what I saw. It made no sense. I felt as if my brain was short-circuiting, trying to interpret signals. It was not meant for human senses. Was it really a weasel? I turned my eyes away from the weasel. It flickered as if it was just a projection on a broken screen. One moment an animal, a moment later just an idea. When it talked, the air smelled of electric discharge. It felt like the words displayed directly in my mind, but hallucinations or not, they just wouldn't leave me alone. Was I really talking to them? Am I really talking to? I asked, realizing that I couldn't say what language we were speaking. "No, you're not." My mind was sure that that was what the wolf said. "We are talking to you." "We were sent to educate you," laughed the weasel. "Welcome to Werewolf 101. Please fasten your seatbelt." I let them talk. I didn't slow down, but I let them talk, as they say. Better the devil you know. So they talked. In the beginning, there was Gaia, aka Mother Earth, and she gave birth to the mighty breed of warriors. The weasel began. It sounded electronical, like a teenager reading a Wikipedia page over the voice chat. Maybe you guys should just save it as a Wikipedia page. They were called Garrow, that's werewolves and werewolfish, and their sole purpose was to protect Gaia. They failed, wailed the wolf. The path split into three. One branch I knew led to the old oak on a hill. The others were unfamiliar, with first leading to bright clearing, the second deep in the dark woods. There were shadows moving between them, whispering to me. I looked at the weasel for advice. Which way should I go? But it only shrugged with a wry smile. When time began, Gaia released three primordial forces upon the earth: the weaver, the wild, and the worm. The weasel continued. The wild was the untamed force of life and creation. The cold, ruthless weaver gave structure to the world, and the worm destroyed what needed to be destroyed, creating balance. I ran towards the light. Ran toward the light. I had to get my bearings. The weasel started laughing. But then the weaver grew too ambitious and trapped the worm within its lifeless web. The weasel started laughing, and I realized that the clearing had been cut through the forest to make way for power lines. I doubled over in pain. The worm went insane and turned against all of the creation. The weasel's voice became distant, but the weaver didn't stop. 1,000 high-pitched voices exploded in my ears, speaking words I could almost understand, overwhelming with new stimuli. I started thrashing. "Change!" came a snarled command. Thinking it was the wolf, suddenly understood. It was as if I always known, always had the set of skills, I'd only chosen not to use them up to this point. It felt like I was about to stretch. After a long day of sitting down and learning anatomy, it was painful, but I wanted to do this. I cleared my mind and connected to my body. I changed. Now, we're trapped. My body started resetting itself to its familiar shape and it hurt. Bones broke and fused again, muscles and sinews moved under my skin. I cried and trashed. Then, panting sweatily, I was a human again. The change hurt more than I expected. The world shifted as I stood up. My bones grew together, felt my fur disappearing, and I flexed my fingers. Color returned to the world. Covered my ears. I looked up. For a moment I saw a clutter of translucent spiders crawling along the power lines. They served the weaver, the weasel said excitedly. Blue sparks danced in its eyes. They're invaders, growled the grey wolf. The noise pissed me off. Apparently it's dealing like literal psychic damage to me. I slowly got used to the noise. It still got on my nerves, but at least it didn't hurt anymore. The spiders were ignoring me, and I chose to ignore them. I was human again, naked and shivering in the breeze. Now Guy is dying, eaten alive by the worm, and choked by the weaver, the weasel said as it climbed on my shoulder. And some choose to ignore the weavers, not the wolf, but I prefer to fight it. I pricked my ears. I heard wolves getting closer and closer. Our packs are almost here, the weasel said, jumping up and down excitedly. Be a good cub, growled the grey wolf, and stay put. So I ran over my dead body and I started running. But you can't outrun your destiny, can you? No matter how fast I ran, the spirits kept up with me. You're a cub, so you have special privileges, said the weasel. Pusha will grant you a vision. Think and make the choice. That's very mean. I don't like any of these people. This is a horrible playthrough. It was hard to find the place of power, although I knew where it was. After I stepped on yet another sharp stone, I gave up any false pretenses and let my animal side take over. Turned into a wolf. I doubled down in pain. My arms and legs cracked and twisted. My skull fractured and reset itself in a different shape. Fragments of bones crawling under the skin. My skin was ripping and sprouting fur. I howled in agony. When the pain subsided, it was Lupus, a wolf. Seeing the world in smells and sounds. It felt like Pusha playing with me, twisting paths, blocking my way with bushes and dead trees, then suddenly opening a new path. It was straight and full of sunshine. I pushed on. I'm not raising rage. Determined, I pushed on. The forest was different when I was running on four legs. Paths shifted, and what was once a blockade was now an opening. Smells were my guide, more efficient than human eyes. The smell of ash and old blood, bone and wet stones. Then I was there. There it was, the place of power. Stones in a circle, old apple trees buzzing in the air. I opened my mind to the buzzing. I thought it was gonna deal psychic damage to me too. There is a swirl. It starts deep within me and then it expands. Everything is in motion, and there is no center anymore. There is grass. Grass covers me, and from under the grass I hear a wolf. Her howl like a keen. She keens after me when I fall. She mourns my blood that spills on the ground. Yet another of her cubs lost. It whispers. In balance with this life, this death, it whispers to me. Trees grow. Little trees grow from where my eyes have been. Life goes on. A snail lives in my open mouth. Life goes on. Seasons pass. Squirrel hides their acorns between my ribs. Seasons pass. Years go by. The acorns grow and turn into oak trees. Years go by. And then there is no more me and no more Forrest. There's only us. But there is no time to enjoy that. There is no common ground between us and civilization, only the man's land, and none of us dare cross. They stand there with their machines, while we retreat to fight another day. But there are other facts. There is tension that needs to be resolved. And we try to talk. And one day, try to invite them to join us. Us who work together hand in hand, clearing the falling trees, protecting the standing ones, healing the damage, building the roads, breathing the air, hiding under the trees from the burning sun. Talking. Talking. Reasoning. Living. A wolf is keening in the forest. I open my eyes. The ash-grey wolf stands in front of me. Do you understand what you have to do? She asks. I had to set the world on fire. I understand. Humans pretend to care for the forest, but they want to steal it. I can see through their lies. It's what Pusha wants. She looked me in the eyes. No compromise. Be my teeth, be my claws, my rage. Kill them all. Save the forest. I looked at her. It's not them that I want to kill. I saw her for who she was. Her pelt was marred with fire. Her eyes were smoking embers. Ash was falling from her heaving flanks. She looked old, ancient, sad and alone. She was Kazan's mother. Mourning her stolen cubs, howling in the woods, waiting for a response that never came, but she was more than that. She was the darkness. She was the darkness itself, lost in her grief, swallowed by mourning so intense that it warped everything it touched. Wherever she's been before was gone, only the need of revenge remained. At least that was what I thought when I looked at her. The wolf mother looked back at me, and something in her eyes made me realize that she was trying to tell me what Pusha wanted of me. Join me. Only you can understand me. But I decided to walk my own path. Took a step back, then another and another. I turned away and chose my own path. Do not fool yourself, the wolf cried to me. There is no choice, there never was. The future awaited. They have been so adamant in chasing me. Fuckers. Lone howl pierced the silence like a single ray of moonlight in the darkness. And was another one, and then another, and then another. A choir of voices, triumphant and joyful. I opened my eyes. I was in the clearing. Around me were wolves, huge, monstrous wolves, howling at the moon. I realized that this was my life now. I wouldn't put up with it. The moment of bittersweet reflection, I understood that my old life was over. Maya, the student, was a part of the past. My present, my future, was now forever linked to what happened in the forest. Good! You're almost ready now, said Olga, looking at me impatiently. Welcome to the set. I just listened. We live in packs, Olga explained, and when packs unite to fight a common enemy, they form a set. So there were 2 packs here. I realized that there must be 2 packs here. I looked at Daniel. Hi, Maya, said one of the wolves, changing into Daniel, who looked more real as a wolf. Confident and relaxed. Olga and Lisa also stood up, human-looking again, their clothes rumbled. We are the pack of mourning wolf mother, she said. They smelled of ash and tears, and for a moment I saw the wolf spirit among them. I looked at Cornell's friends. The young black wolf changed into Pat and Kim, her moments later. We are what's left of the winter weasel pack, said Kim. White shadows settled on Pat's shoulder. Smelled musk and electricity. We're Gaia's warriors, said Olga. And that we have no choice, but we can choose friends who will stand by our side. The war didn't sound safe. Is this war a necessity? I asked. It doesn't exactly sound safe. It's not, but if the worm wins, we'll all die anyway, Olga shrugged. The name of the enemy reeked of decay and burning oil. War is not safe unless you know the trick, Pat smiled. The trick is to make the enemies die fast. Do I have to join a pack? Just to make sure. No, Garo can survive on their own, Olga stated the obvious. May not like it, but if you want to live, you need our support, and we need you. I had so many questions, like, why are you assholes? What about the moon? Why did I hear the moon whispering to me? I asked. Luna gave us rage. This is why she's important, Olga said. And that is why you'll never be able to touch silver again. Is every set that diverse? You're from all over Europe, I noticed. Is this like standard for a set? I looked at Olga, the only person left alive. Fucker. Didn't even know if that was a stupid question or a smart one. It looked at Olga. Normally the tribes keep to themselves, Olga grimaced. But we're in a desperate situation, had to form a rather unorthodox alliances. Or at least a dozen tribes, Daniel interrupted, and I hope, Maya, that you will choose yours wisely. How did the spirits work? The world casts a shadow, and we call it the Umbra, said Lisa. And in the shadow, every living creature, every emotion and idea, every important object exists as a spirit. That's all you need to know at the moment. I summed it all up. So if I got this all right, I've been conscripted into an ancient war against the worm, I said slowly, trying to put it all together, and the moon gave me rage as a weapon, and I must avoid silver. I took a breath. There's a whole secret world of spirits, I continued, and I have to join a pack and choose a tribe. Exactly, Lisa nodded. As for the tribe, there's only one person who can mentor you now that Cornell's dead. Olga is the Black Furries, an ancient tribe of women warriors. Strong, save Gaia fuck patriarchy vibes. What about my family's tribe? Yeah, but what about my family's tribe, I asked. Lisa winced. Daniel sighed. Olga shook her head. What was the matter? What's the matter? I asked again. Your ancestors were the Gera Fenris. Not one here wants to have anything to do with that tribe. Kim barred their fangs. They stand against everything we believe in. Were they really that bad? They surely aren't that bad, I asked, are they? Gera Fenris are the most radical Garo supremacists that ever marched the earth. Like legit fascist werewolves, some of them literally worked for Hitler. I had the right to know my legacy, and I am not joining your tribe. Thank you for telling me, I said. I had the right to know where I came from. For a moment, we were all silent. There were a lot of werewolves here. One thing is bugging me, I said. Why are there so many of you here? Suddenly everyone in Bielovisha is a werewolf or what? You know nothing, cub, Olga laughed bitterly. A mere century ago, there were dozens of pacts in these forests. But none of the old guards survived the 90s, Lisa shook her head. We had to start from scratch. Not counting you, there are only 5 of us and only 3 local, Pat pointed out. Barely enough for one pack. I wanted to learn more about the tribes and find an option that would really resonate with who I was, but I didn't want to talk. I was too exhausted to bug them with personal questions. Anyway, before you're admitted to the tribe, you need to prove yourself. What now? Prove myself? I was shocked. Hadn't I proved myself enough already? You went through your first change, Pat said. She was leaning on the tree nearby. And you know everything you need to know at the moment. You have to go through the rite of passage. Daniel rubbed against my leg, excited. Oh, I'm sorry, Daniel. Keep it down. What are you rubbing against me? A vision quest, Kim winked at me. And since we don't have time for tests, we need you to solve a real problem. Namely, we want you to find a way of ending this logging problem. So, how would you do it? I took my time. My old self was gone, replaced by a shape-shifting eco-warrior, but deep down I was still the same person, and with the same ideas and ideals. I knew what I had to do. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I had a plan to expose the loggers. Loggers need to see what happens when they cross the line. We just need to help them cross it. Lisa rolled her eyes. You're all blind and ignore our most powerful ally. There are many ancient spirits in Pusha, and we should talk to them. I continued with my plan. I'll lure the loggers to a protected area and record what they're doing. When it hits the internet, the authorities will have to ban the logging. Pat grinned. I know exactly the place you need. Spoken like a true ragabash. You were born under the new moon, weren't you, Maya? How did you know, Daniel? Mom always told me that when she gave birth to me, the night was so dark that she was afraid something happened to the moon and the stars were all alone in the dark sky. I nodded. You're right, how did you know? Born under the new moon are tricksters and questioners, just like you and me. We are the most cunning of them all, and our path is the perfect mix of glory, honor, and wisdom. You see, I kinda just wanna, like, leave. Like, I legitimately want to leave, because what the fuck? You literally bit the only dude I cared about. I felt overwhelmed. Olga must have sensed my confusion. Come on, we have a lot to discuss, she patted my shoulder. We have to find your phone and wallet. So I followed her. I had to tie up loose ends in my old life. I am sitting on a bus. The sun streaming through the windows is making it hard to see. The narrow road cuts through a dense old forest. My mind wanders. I remember doing something important, walking among the trees, looking for something, losing something I loved, gaining something unwanted. But then I'm finally awake and the memories scatter away. We're almost there, said Anya. I did some searching. She looks at me over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. She's such a dork. I laugh. Anya, you're such an adorable dork. Not able to finish. I start to cough. I spit blood. Anya, I need help. She looks at me worried. You should drink something. Here. She pulls a bottle from her backpack and gives it to me. I take a sip and feel something dry and acrid in my mouth, and then it starts to move. Spiders. I spit it out and see thousands of small spiders leaving my mouth. Threads of silk cover me, the seat, everything around us. I scream. I tried to scream, but they gagged me the moment I opened my mouth. A few seconds later, I'm covered in cobwebs, unable to move. There is a hiss. I hear a hiss. Then slowly, a long, dark, bloody shape comes out of Anya's eye socket, pushing the eye out. A black snake that reeks of rotten meat, acid, and oil. Don't fight, Maya, you're already mine, it says, just like your grandpa. And then it kisses me. I woke up in my bed in the B&B, and for a moment I thought that the whole werewolf business had been a dream. Then I heard muffled giggling. I looked up and saw Anya and Bartek looking at me from the other bed. You caught us, but I thought you would stay with your German friends a little longer, said Bartek, embarrassed. We knew you were alright, Anya chimed in. And what's with you sneaking in through the window in the middle of the night naked? She raised her eyebrow. Did some crazy things back home, but I never partied that hard. Yeah! When my new friends said I destroyed the last set of my clothes and had to go back as a wolf, they weren't joking. There was so much to talk about. Now, whose fault is that? Miss rips a person's head off and bites me. How was I? I'm alright. Sorry for disappearing so suddenly, I said, because what else could I say? I told a version of the truth. I got lost in the forest. Technically, that part wasn't a lie. I stumbled on some activists and I kinda got carried away. I was worried about them. Are you alright? I asked. I was worried about you. Yeah, said Anya, stretching her head. After we were separated in the forest, I got lost and Bartek found me. We, ended up here. Hadn't they seen us? Didn't you see anything unusual? We had to go a long way around to avoid the hunters, but apart from that, it was just the forest at night, she said. A bit scary, but nothing unusual. So Pat was right. The human mind couldn't cope with seeing a Krynos, and when the delirium ended, the subconsciousness patched the holes in their memory with something rational. How are you feeling? I wanted to tell her everything, and I should just take a bus and fuck the forest. I felt a rift growing between me and Anya, and I felt the sudden urge to tell her everything. Told her something she could understand. Couldn't tell her the truth. I was a Garrow and I had a sacred duty to protect the veil hiding us from the mortal eyes, but I could tell her something. I learned something important about myself, I said, and I had to follow it for a while. Sorry for the sudden change of plan. I sighed and continued packing. So are you leaving? Asked Bartek. What about the forest? I didn't know how to answer. I shrugged. Whatever the answer was, it was now Maya the werewolf's problem. Maya the student was dead. Let us know when you figure it out, Bartek. Bartek? No, said Bartek. I'm not telling him to figure it out. I'll be waiting. Anya hugged me. I mumbled something, took my bag and left. I dropped my bags in the camp and ran through the plan one more time. Expected me to act like a ragabash, but Lisa had proposed another plan, one more spiritual. I'm just gonna go and do the spiritual ritual because I haven't before. I needed to talk to the spirits of the forest, and for that I needed Lisa's help. She was the only shaman in the 2 packs, and a good one at that. Had a lot to learn. Before I could face the spirits, I had to attune to Pusha and learn the proper rites and means of addressing the spirits. Finally, we're ready. After a few days of camping in the forest, fasting and meditating, Lisa said I was ready. The spirits of the forest were waiting. Jesus Christ, they wanted me to starve for days. That's not very nice. The sun was setting. We stood in the middle of the clearing and I waited. I spilled my blood. I have a lot to give, but not a lot of willpower. I spilled my blood as a sacrifice to the spirits and called them by the secret names. We watched the blood sink into the ground and waited. First there was a murmur, then a whisper among the trees and rustle of leaves in the quiet, windless night. I closed my eyes. And the smell of feathers in the night washed over me. Something whispered inside my skull, a voice like paws scratching the bone. What do you want? It asked. We needed help. Send the wind and send the rain, O great forest, I chanted. Drown their machines in the mud, break the dead trees so that they fall on their heads. Help us break their teeth. The rustling continued and the scratching became almost unbearable. Yes, whispered the voice inside my skull. Stop climbing over there, kitty. But there is a price. I did not know what to expect. I tensed up, not sure what to expect. Hunt us, young one. Find and catch us, and then we will help you. Lisa looked at me. This is what I've been training for, she urged. Hunt. I ran. I turned around helpless. There was a rustle of the leaves, but it faded away. I couldn't see anything apart from big shapes, shadows against the darkness. I looked around. I still couldn't see anything but the trees moving in the wind against the darkening skies. I changed. I'm just gonna be the faster form. I sniffed the air. I was on all fours, my nose full of scents, my ears full of noises. Turned my head to the right, sniffing the air. There, that way. I caught the scent of a distant shape hiding among the trees. It was a stag, pretty and lithe, a perfect vessel for the spirits. It stood there for a moment and then it caught my scent and bolted. I ran after my prey. A stag was fast, but I was faster. I smelled its fear and heard its hooves beating the ground. With every pounce, was closing the distance between us. I focused on the hunt. Blocked out everything apart from my prey. The forest faded away, leaving only the hunt. I was getting closer. I could smell its sweat, heard its heartbeat in the darkness. I pushed myself to the absolute limits. My muscles and lungs burned. It was almost too easy. I launched from the ground with my hind legs and landed on the stag's back. The hunt was over. I held my prey down. I changed to get a better grip. Ah, the near-human form. Glass bros. The pain was stronger than I ever imagined. I felt my muscles spasm as they rearranged themselves, my jaw cracked and my mouth filled with blood. I clenched my fists and claws drove into my palms. And I rose, panting sweaty. I was more than a human. I was glass, bro. Wolfish, strong, and scary. I pinned my prey to the ground. It went limp and then started struggling again, and I realized that the spirit I was chasing was already elsewhere, but it was too late. Something moved behind me. Something big. I turned around. Gulped and slowly turned around. At first I thought it was a bison standing there with its head lowered, but then it straightened and stood on its hind legs. Ivy was brought around my arms and eyes were dark and wise. Maya, it said in a voice so deep it shook my bones. It is you! Well, I touched it and then the hunt was over. I reached out and touched its chest. My hand disappeared in the dense mossy fur. Hunt is over, I said. I caught you. Its laugh was like a gale, like a forest fire, like flood wave on the river. It washed over me and I stumbled back and they fell. The sky was full of light. I've never seen so many stars before. I stood up. I would like a full power back, please. I rolled on the ground and stood up, the spirit looking at me with its dark, inscrutable eyes. You fought well, it said, its voice like clamor of birds. We will help you. I bowed. Thank you, I said. When I looked up, the spirit was gone, but I knew that Pusha was waiting and waiting for my sign. I couldn't wait for the SEPT meeting that morning. Closing the deal with the spirits was my rite of passage, and I knew that I did great. I couldn't believe I made it so far. We met soon after the sunrise. On the same clearing where I woke for the first time as a Garrow. Lisa looked at us and smiled. Our patrons were looking at us expectantly. She stepped towards the center of the clearing. I'm the Thurge of this SEPT. I'm here to make sure that things go the right way. I held my breath. She turned to me and I held my breath. Maya, come forth. Are you a cub who seeks recognition as an adult? She knew already. You know that I am, I rolled my eyes. Are you a cub who seeks recognition as an adult? She asked again, no humor in her eyes. This was ridiculous. I am, I answered, not trying to hide that I thought about this ridiculous charade. Are you an applicant to a tribe? I confirm. Who speaks for the cub? Asked Olga. I do, Lisa answered. I am Zoraya of the Cyberath, Thurge of the Morning Wolfmother pack. I observed the cub on her mission and I'm here to tell the story. Zoraya, really? Did they all have secret wolf names? I shook my head, thinking of the whole thing, had strange cult vibes. Has the cub passed her challenge? Of course I did. I grinned because I knew that I passed. She succeeded, was the answer. The challenge was hard and she overcame it. Lisa turned to me. Have you chosen your name? My new secret name. Suddenly I remembered my grandfather talking about his old friends. He never used their real names. They were always Thunder or Grey or Needle. I always thought it was a gorilla thing, some kind of war names. Now I'm not so sure anymore. How to capture my whole life and aspirations, personality, and heritage? In one name, I cleared my throat. I'm gonna just be an enigma. I don't want them to know me. My name is an enigma, I answered, thinking how I was a mystery even to myself. As for the tribe, I wanted to be a Black Fury. God damn it. I didn't even get the choice. But it never happened. Olga made sure of it. The enmity between us went too far from any hope of reconciliation. It was complicated. I felt that Olga's way wasn't right for me. I don't think it's that simple, I said, looking at Lisa. I don't see myself fitting into any of your tribes. The Wolf Mother stood by my side. I can teach her the old ways, said the Wolf Mother, standing by my side. Just like I taught her grandfather and his ancestors. I won't stand a get of Fenris among us. Kim spit at the ground and bared her teeth. There's too much blood spilled between me and them. I don't speak for Fenrir, growled the wolf mother. I speak for all of the ancient gods of mountains and forests and love and war. Gods who came here long before Christianity and whom I still remember. I will make this cub a servant to the Vanir. Vanir's Wrath, a nascent splinter of the Gera Fenrirs, identifying with the Vanir of ancient Nordic lore. Ha! I get to have my family's legacy because Olga's a dick. I felt it like a snare was snapping on my leg. Only one full thing remained to end the ceremony and make me a full-fledged Garrow. I had to join a pack. I was already sworn to the Wolf Mother. As my fate had been already tied to the Wolf Mother, I chose my patron and I joined Olga's pack. There was no love lost between me and Olga, but I was a valuable addition to her pack and she was a good enough leader to recognize it. So it was done. According to the ancient rites, Lisa painted the mystical glyph of my tribe on my sternum and disappeared after a moment, but whenever I closed my eyes, I could feel its warm touch between my breasts. Enigma of the Vanir's Wrath, Ragabash of the Morning, Wolf Mother Pack, welcome to our set. Then she growled. Howls rose towards the sky. They sang about ancient laws of war and status and secrecy. I remembered only a few. Combat the worm whenever it dwells and wherever it breeds. Submit to those of higher position. Respect those beneath you. The veil shall not be lifted. I have no business being here. And I kind of feel like I could just, like, leave. I have a spirit watching me. Why do I need the rest of them? I threw my head back and howled with my set. I was a cub no more. I was ready to tell my own stories, to earn my own place in the pack, to howl my own song. Ah, the storm, which I summoned. It was one of those blistering summer days when the asphalt melts, the grass withers, and the air smothers. Those brave enough to step outside. Despite the heat, it felt like the whole village was at a funeral. It was moving. I stood there surrounded by people weeping over their loss, looking at their rosaries they clutched in their fists. Something tightened in my chest. The body of a hunter had been found in the forest. The circumstances of their death were unclear. What was our doing? Look, I just tried to get out of there. I even got the stupid other person killed. It was our doing, my doing. And the death had tipped the scales. Did anyone suspect that I was responsible for the death? I didn't think so. To them, I was just a strange girl, harmless and far from home. They looked at me, but they didn't really see me. I could feel the tension seething around me. The death of this funeral had pushed the community, already weary and frightened by the recent disappearances in the forest, to the edge. The world was watching. The press had swarmed the funeral like flies. I could hear them squawking about how both sides of the conflict were escalating the situation. The police were watching the crowd with disinterest as they leaned lazily against the trees. It had become political. Suddenly, Pusha, Bielorussia, has become politically charged and the hottest place to be in Poland. It wasn't only local politicians and activists from both sides who caught wind of the commotion. The Minister of Environment himself had driven to Bielorussia to attend the funeral. He was standing next to the priest conducting the ceremony, surrounded by police and what looked like a handful of guards. The coffin went down and the crowd stirred. Everyone started lining up to throw a handful of dust at the coffin to put the flowers on the grave. I felt someone joining me. "Just look at them," said Lisa, joining me. "Nobody wants us here. They fear us. But they would never admit that." I couldn't blame them. Who could blame them? I shrugged. Since we started the protest, people had been disappearing. They would want us gone, even if we weren't the Garrow, she scoffed. From the outside, we're activists fighting the Pusha. But for the local, we're just strangers barging in and telling them what to do with their lives. We had to give them time. I am not taking any rage, sorry. They just need time to get used to us, I said. The problem is not going to disappear, and finally they'll join us. Nevertheless, she was right. The crowd was not happy seeing us there, and the minister knew how to make a sentiment. I listened in disbelief. I watched in disbelief as the priest handed him the mic. He wasn't someone you would call a good speaker. He repeated same platitudes, but it was clear he'd only come to show his face and tighten the leash on the local logging companies. The crowd listened silent. It was also our doing. I realized the conflict was only going to escalate in the big part and it was our doing. It was too late to back down, but with the forest on our side, we could end the logging at any time. We were ready to negotiate. There's been a storm the previous night, but when the final showdown started, the sun was at its most merciless and the world was almost white with heat. The air smelled of herbs, bark, and tree sap. Insects buzzed lazily and the high grass stunned by the summer sun. Some insects can actually spontaneously combust when they get too hot. It's horrifying. We were setting up the protest. The day was stifling as we set up the protest. The whole clearing was decorated with banners and we all had our placards. The banner we hung on the National Park headquarters that week before was just a warm-up. What is the enemy of the forest was our main slogan, but there were many more. I wanted to protest greed. Pusha is not a commodity, declared my sign. You couldn't put a price tag on 200-year-old trees, but that wasn't going to stop them trying. Only 200? That's not that much. There weren't so many of us, but everyone in the clearing knew why they were there. The Pusha was watching us. The Pusha was watching us. Every time a gust of wind was bringing the wet smell of the forest to my nostrils, I felt her strong, steadfast presence. She knew that we were doing everything in our power to save her. Heavy clouds were hanging low over the trees. The spirits were gathering to support us in the final moments. I felt the forest's presence. And I'm very suspicious of my cat. I think he hasn't done anything, but sometimes you just like have this, I don't know, smell, and you're like, did you do something? The Pusha was watching us. Every time a gust of wind was bringing the wet smell of the forest to my nostrils, I felt her strong, steadfast presence. She knew that we were doing everything in our power to save her. Heavy clouds were hanging low over the trees. The spirits were gathering to support us in the final moments. I could feel the immense presence of the forest, whose life was a myriad of smaller lives interconnected into one superorganism. Then I looked at us and them and smiled bitterly because I realized that both sides of the conflict saw the others as the sickness and themselves as the cure. The presence was almost palpable, and tempers were flaring. The cops were gathering. The police were nervous, huddling in groups and shouting at each other and everyone who was in their way. They clearly didn't want to be here. Something was up. It was apparent that they were waiting for something. I looked at my pack. Probably violence? That's why normally police attend, protests to stop that. Everyone knows what to do, Olga asked, looking at my pack. I'll keep the security guards occupied, nodded Lisa, and I'll guard the Pusha's perimeter, growled Daniel. I glanced at the weasels. The weasels were in their positions among the protesters as agreed. It left the cops to me. Hello! Visual novel did not allow me to not be a werewolf, which is really stupid and got my, rage going. So I'm just trying to, close this. I would love if more werewolves died, honestly, but I don't think I can make that happen. I will keep my eyes on the police. I'll keep my eyes on the cops, I said, and we'll make sure that the activists are safe. Yeah, that's the plan, Olga nodded with bitter expression. Then it reached the boiling point. It reached the boiling point when the minister arrived for a photo op. We could use that. Looked at it as a good sign. We could use the presence to our advantage. In more ways than one. I calmed down slightly. He posed and played the great statesman while the bored journalists took pictures and asked prearranged questions. Just another day in the media circus. In hindsight, you could argue that what happened next set the chain of events in motion that had life-changing consequences for many. But the change didn't happen just like that. There is a notion that change is sudden. Movies and video games would have us believe that it takes one moment, one decision, one knockoff and effect to turn the tide. But the world doesn't work like that. It works like the forest, like the pusha. Change is like growth. It is a slow, barely visible process. A series of decisions but also coincidences of chances being taken and people doing what they can to survive. Change is like growth, and we had grown. The members of my set had already moved to their positions. I also had my part to play. The minister was bad news. With him at the scene, everything will get harder, I sighed, pointing at the minister. Olga nodded. I wasn't ready to give up. It was our chance to start negotiations. If you think there's any sense in talking to them, she smirked, now's the fucking time. She grabbed me by the elbow and literally dragged me across the clearing to where the minister and his people were standing. I thought about what to say. As we were pushing through the crowd, I planned what I was going to say. I was pretty confident. Had it all planned out and felt quite confident, but Olga had her own plans. Minister, do you have a moment to talk about what's really going on in the forest? I caught his gaze. He looked at us coldly, like we were vermin. His eyes were distinctly dark and lifeless, like shark, I thought suddenly. No, he said, smiling. We don't talk to terrorists. Put my hand on Olga's shoulder and felt how tense she was. Her muscles vibrated, resisting the change. It's not worth it, I whispered. We'll find another way. We went back to regroup. The activists, humans, and werewolves alike listened as we told them what had happened. The atmosphere was tense. We started our preparations. We prepared ourselves for the worst-case scenario. Okay, let's move, I heard someone shout. Move it, people, move it, you know what to do. And they did. There was a lot of laughter and friendly pushing. Chains clicking, and some people darted up the trees to seat themselves in the branches. I was assigned to the human chain because I'm out of willpower. Helped to form the human chain. Hey, I heard. Get those arms behind you. That's it. Attaboy. It hurts, moaned the man's voice. Next time, do some yoga beforehand, huh? That's it, people. Open your hearts so that you can hold your wrists behind your backs. So I locked in wrists. I threw my arms through the arms of the people to my left and right and then grabbed my wrists behind my back. It was tight on my shoulders, hot and very sweaty. Then we waited. We sat down, one long human chain, and watched the loggers and police as they approached, and then stopped. The sun shone, it was calm, almost serene. It worked. Did it? The talk started there and then. I could see that the minister was an apt politician and that he could smell a deal for himself in it all, but didn't really care. We got what we wanted. We started to talk. Well, I suppose if locking yourself to a tree works, it works. It rarely does. When the talk started, we weren't alone. The sudden storm that evening made us all huddle in makeshift tents, and the forced closeness helped to break the ice. Many old rotten trees were toppled by the wind, and we used the occasion to move the discussion from trees being cut down to whether fallen trees should be removed. So we started talking, and it became big. I don't know what tipped the scales in the end, the press, international attention, the local interests coming together, or our passion. The talks weren't easy. Finally, an agreement was within our reach, but the talks weren't easy. The state forests, the woodcutters, the local population, ecologists, scientists, activists, everyone wanted something. I was by no means an expert, but I wanted to play my part in the proceedings. I acted behind the scenes. I kept out of sight and acted behind the scenes. There was a lot of misinformation spreading about the talks, and the activists need some cunning and quick-witted to weed out the fake news. The talks went on and on. Of course I had my opinions. I really shouldn't share them, really. Everyone at the scene had their own opinion and their own point of view, and I had mine. Let's take the bark beetle. In the middle of it was, of course, the spruce bark beetle. How could something so small cause such a gigantic uproar? The beetle had always been part of the forest ecosystem, pointed out one of the ecologists, but the recent droughts made the spruce more susceptible than ever. The foresters countered. We have to cut down the trees to stop a total disaster. I saw one problem with this approach. I didn't trust the officials. I didn't trust the word that came out of the officials' mouths. The beetle was not the reason for the logging, it was an excuse. You fetishized the forest, scoffed one of the officials. People cultivated for hundreds of years and it cannot survive without our help. He's right. You want to take our forest from us, a group of locals attacked the activists. You're not from here and you tell us how to live our lives. Yet they unbalanced the ecosystem. The problem was that human intervention unbalanced the ecosystem, and if they pushed any further, they would lose all that made Pusha unique. Opinions clashed, tempers flared, and eventually new constructive ideas started to emerge. At least one of them caught my attention. International observers could help. Oh god, I'm just inviting more foreigners, that's great. It was a proposition to form a committee of international observers, scientists and foresters to make sure that the logging was targeting the spruce bark beetle problem only. It was a long and hot day, I rubbed my eyes, I was so tired I could barely keep them open. My head was spinning, but I kept going. I have so much health, I'm fine with it. What's a little heat stroke when so much is at stake? The talks continued. Of course they had to make it dramatic. There were cameras, there were lights, and the negotiations lasted all day long. We reached the first draft of an agreement literally at sunset. I had no doubts. They only decided to stop the logging because they realized there was something in it for them. I felt relief. But at the moment, I just looked at the sky and laughed. I felt overwhelming relief. And then my exhaustion caught up with me. I found a quiet spot, sank to the ground, and fell asleep. I never thought it would end like this. The humans surprised me. Yeah, sure, the humans were important, but they were the problem we needed to solve, not the problem solvers, and yet in the coming weeks they proved to be just that. They had plans for education, for patrolling the forest, for making a permanent camp near Białowieża. I didn't know how to process this. It was all well and good, but I felt hollow. The logging had stopped. Yay! I have willpower again. It was quiet, the logging had stopped, and I was proud I had a hand in it. We talked with people, listened to their ideas, and shared their enthusiasm. We planned, we joked, we laughed. At some point, I found myself sitting near an old woman. She smiled at me, all wrinkles, missing teeth, and bad attitude. I nodded politely. You're the young... whatever people have been talking about, aren't you? She asked when I acknowledged her. Yeah, I answered, unsure what would happen next. She laughed. I was a little worried when I first heard about you. I mean, goddamn werewolves always make a mess. What did she mean always? Wait, always? I asked, thinking she was a little too judgmental. Every goddamn time, she shrugged. The problem is you're always looking for another glorious battle, she scoffed. So what, we were useless? I sighed. Don't be stupid. You act on impulse like children or animals. When you want to do something, you just do it. She laughed. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. She smiled at me. But this time you managed to actually do something good. We'll see what happens next. Well, I smiled. I have no rage. I smiled, satisfied. Time would tell if she was right. We gathered in the clearing in which I first woken up as a Garrow. Lisa stood in the middle of the clearing, the wolf and the weasel circling her on each other cautiously. Olga, honey, she said, looking at the Black Fury. It is time to decide the Sept's fate. Olga nodded. There was anger in her eyes. It won't last. The peace won't last, she said, clenching her fists. I killed Cornell to prevent this, but here we fucking are. That night, we fought. The rifts that divided our Sept proved inconsolable. Him and Pat left. Harsh words were exchanged, fangs were bared, but no blood was spilled. Later, Kim and Pat decided to return to Germany. They said that they preferred a light transfer change to the most heroic of stupid, glorious deaths. I let them go. I watched them go. Olga approved of my decision. Lisa and our patrons made sure that we did right by Garrow law and that set matters were resolved. But more had happened that summer. But it didn't cover everything that happened that summer though, so some consequences would have to unravel with time. Daniel introduced me to the wolves. Well, that's nice. Later, Daniel introduced me to the wild wolf packs living in the forest. We would spend a lot of time with them searching for the lost Garrow cubs we hoped were out there. Anya and Bartek were still alive? I'm sorry, you mean, not searching for lost Garrow wolf cubs, but assaulting people in the middle of the night, I think. Despite everything that had happened, Anya and Bartek were still alive. They had a summer fling they would both remember with a smile. We would disappear from each other's lives slowly, our paths too different to keep up with each other. But it was all still ahead of me. For now, the first chapter of my life was coming to an end. I come here because of the forest. And now I knew it. I was part of it. Its protector and its weapon. But I loved Busha, and I knew she was watching over me. The game is like, look at your character sheet, you have one. I hate how I got the same clan twice, even though I didn't try to do that. I do like the fact that I managed to get a third tribe because, one of the people had their heads be ripped off. Dead. Gone. Gone. Cautious. Neutral. I have barely any friends, and the 2 human friends is not someone that I can spend time with. Late that night, I was sitting with my back against a tree older than the country I was born in, watching the stars. They moved. They were moving, dancing around me, and it was only after a moment that I realized they were fireflies. I watched the bugs glowing with the inner light, writing fleeting love poems on the dark vellum of the night. I watched them with a smile. I smiled, thinking about their brief, beautiful, intense lives. Then I stood up and went back to our camp. We still had many important things to do. The end. Cubs gather around the fire and listen to the story of Maya Borodich, known among the Garrow as Enigma of the Vanir's Wrath, Ragabash of the Morning Wolf Mother Pack. There was always wisdom to her schemes. Maya managed to negotiate a fragile peace and stop the harvesters. The change had begun. The first protests against the logging of the Bielowiesza forest took place in 2016. The game was loosely inspired by those events. All characters and events depicted in the game are entirely fictitious, or they want us to believe that there are werewolves in Poland. Huh. Okay. Having spent the whole time trying not to become a wolf, I hate how the game decided to railroad me. And that rage just really continued going. Like, in the characters, from the character's perspective, there's absolutely no reason why I should have joined that pack or stayed there. I mean, the dudes ripped off another guy's head, which I like, and then they force turned me into Garrow, which is... what the fuck? And then they're like, oh yeah, you're just staying here to protect the forest. That would be like, I'm burning the forest down. It's not that bad if you go with it, like I did in the last one, where I was like, oh yeah, let me just play this out. But when you don't, oh god, this game just feels really awful. Anyway, I'm satisfied. We had 2 playthroughs of this. There's a 3rd way of playing it that I should try at some point, which is to be like, you know, brave and have far too much rage all the time, because I always get the rage low. But I'm not gonna be doing that on stream. I'll do it myself if I feel like it at some point. Because I really hate that the game railroaded me. It's not ideal that it's only like 2-something hours long, even though I'm reading everything, so like if I wanted to play through it myself, it would, what, be closer to an hour and a half probably. Especially considering that I could be skipping a lot of the things that I have already known. But at the same time, it's an indie studio, which just kind of makes Date with Death seem more impressive, because holy shit, they released a game that's as long as this with 5 different endings for free, and that game felt like it was railroading me a lot less, even though there's literally only one way of doing it. This one literally felt like a slap. Like, there's just a D&D GM that really doesn't want you to go off the rails, so they kind of hit you in the face and force you back. I don't enjoy that whatsoever. But it is what it is. I heard that this is the better of the 2 werewolf games that we have. The other one is more actiony, but I will play that one at some point too. You see, at least with actiony ones, you can like ignore the story, and you can just enjoy the action, and that can be a decent game. But this one would have to have a good story, so it's a shame that it's short, and shame that it railroads you, but I feel like I'm now satisfied with being done with it. I feel like it's a better experience if you go with the game and don't notice how badly it railroads you. I feel that that's a happier playthrough, because I had a better opinion of it the last time I did it. But anyways, thank you for joining me, and next week I join you back with some more Bloodlines. Our last run of the year might last the whole January, might last less time. I want to do Salubri, and I want to try and do a balanced playthrough, which is where I'm gonna be trying to keep all the skill points at about 5. And if I can't, my power's at like 2 or 3 out of 5. Just because it sounds really ridiculous. If you're not good at anything, at some point those skill points like make absolutely no difference. I think it's so bad that like persuasion and seduction and so on, they make no difference if they're not above 5 outside of Santa Monica. So I feel like if you're good at everything, you're gonna be good at nothing, but I want to try it. So we're gonna be trying that next. Thank you for joining me, and I see you the next week. Toodaloo.